TNA Bound for Glory 2009 pay-per-view review. Pay-per-view just ended, and I thought overall it was a pretty good pay-per-view outing from TNA. This is probably one of TNA's better pay-per-views in a little while. Now, there were a few things with some matches that maybe could have been a little better than what it was, but I think overall the whole entire event was pretty enjoyable, and really there was only one match that you would classify as terrible, and maybe two matches. There was one other one that you probably would have classified as in between terrible or maybe watchable or decent. Show started off. They did a live pre-show, and on the live pre-show they did a tag team match with the Motors and Machine Guns versus Jay Lethal and Consequences Creed of Lethal Consequences. And this was a pretty decent match between these two teams. It was just a little too short. I think they should have been given a little more time, but since this match was on the pre-show, I wasn't really expecting them to be given too much time, but what you saw from them was pretty good. Good back and forth action. An X Division based style match. This is the type of match you would expect these two teams to have on Impact, and it was fairly short, like I said, but it was enjoyable, and the Motors and Machine Guns go over and win this match after hitting a crossbody neckbreaker to Consequences Creed in this match. I give the match 2.5 stars, and don't know if they announced it within this match or I might have just missed it and wasn't paying attention to the announcers then, but the first match of the pay-per-view portion of the pay-per-view was the Ultimate X match, and they said that the Pope D'Angelo Nero couldn't make the pay-per-view due to some family emergency, so I don't know what's going on with him at this moment. And they announced that Alex Shelley and Chris Sabin got added to the match because they won the tag team match. They might have said something during the announcing of the tag match on the pre-show. I might have just not been paying attention to it. But the first match on the pay-per-view portion was the Ultimate X match for the X Division Championship with Alex Shelley versus Chris Sabin versus Suicide versus Homicide versus Daniels versus Amazing Red. And this was a very good way to start the pay-per-view. It was, the typical Ultimate X match that you would expect. Very spotty, but it was very enjoyable. Pretty much everyone worked very well, and then Christopher Daniels took a lot of sick bumps within this match, and just very enjoyable. Pretty much everyone in here did some good stuff. A lot of high-flying maneuvers, just what you would expect with one of these matches. And with this Ultimate X match they used the ropes, to have the Ultimate X belt on it, but they had the type of thing they had for like the X match they had up there, kind of like their scaffold match, and they had that above the cables. And the way this match ended was you saw Suicide and Daniels, you saw them up there brawling back and forth, and then did a sick spot where Suicide pretty much, I don't know what you'd call it, maybe like a neck breaker or a DDT or some type of spot to Daniels, and they both fall down, and Amazing Red was up there as well. And then under them, you saw Chris Sabin and Alex Shelley on separate sides of the ropes trying to go for the X Division Championship. And then Red comes down, grabs the title, so Amazing Red does retain the X Division Championship. And very good opening match. Good way to start the pay-per-view. 3 3/4 stars. I would say definitely the match of the night. Then the next matchup was for the TNA Knockouts Tag Team Championships. This was the Beautiful People of Madison Rayne and Velvet Sky versus Taylor Wilde and Sarita. And this was pretty much the same match that you saw at the previous pay-per-view, No Surrender, which wasn't really a bad match, but the thing was, it was, fairly short, and I think even the No Surrender match might have been just a tad bit better. They just really didn't do anything different. It was pretty much the same exact match, same exact ending pretty much as well, where Taylor Wilde and Sarita, they retain after doing the springboard German suplex to Madison Rayne in this match to retain the TNA Knockouts Tag Team Championships, and I would give it 1 3/4 stars. It was at least watchable. Then the next matchup was the match that everyone wasn't expecting anything from, and this was Hernandez versus Eric Young versus Kevin Nash for the Legends Championship. Really nothing much with this match. It wasn't enjoyable at all. This was just a handicap match up until the end of the match, where Eric Young and Kevin Nash were pretty much going against Hernandez. Hernandez got in some offense against them. And then at the end of the match, Eric Young kind of turns on Kevin Nash, and wins the Legends Championship in this match. So Eric Young is the new Legends Champion. Worst match of the night. Probably the only thing on here I would classify in the category of terrible. 1 and 1/4 stars at best, maybe even 1 star. It just wasn't enjoyable for me. Then the next matchup was Booker T and Scott Steiner versus Beer Money Incorporated versus British Invasion versus Team 3D, and the Full Metal Mayhem match, TNA's version of a TLC match. And this was for the TNA World Tag Team Championships and the IWGP Tag Team Championships as well. And this was a pretty good match. It wasn't anything spectacular or anything, but it was at least a good, solid match, I would say. Saw some good brawling in here with Team 3D and Beer Money. They did some decent stuff. British Invasion did some okay stuff as well. Scott Steiner and Booker T, neither one of them really did too much at all in this match. And Booker T within this match, he was pretty much taken out of this match fairly early within the match. So they pretty much on this pay-per-view, I'm pretty sure they have written him off of TNA. He pretty much got stretchered out, so this is probably the last time you're going to see Booker T on TNA television. I don't know what they're going to do with Scott Steiner. I don't know if Scott Steiner will get written off in one of the impacts, or will he just pretty much disappear and they won't really explain it at all. But the way this match was, the first championship victory was because they had the 2 titles up there. This was the weird thing about it. Instead of having the titles up like you normally would have a ladder match, just placed on one of those things, they normally have the titles wrapped around. They had it wrapped around the thing they had above the Ultimate X match, and this was fairly high, so they really didn't do too much with it going up there at much. You saw a couple good spots, a couple good table spots from the Team 3D in this match, and Team 3D, they become the IWGP Tag Team Champions. Pretty much everyone was expecting that to happen within this match, with Team 3D going over as the IWGP Tag Team Champions, since really, they weren't really supposed to change the titles within TNA. That was pretty much Vince Russo doing that. And then Beer Money, they become the not Beer Money, but British Invasion. They become the TNA World Heavyweight Tag Team Champions. I'll give it 3 stars. Pretty decent, solid match. The next matchup was Awesome Kong versus Terra versus ODB. And this was actually a little better than I was expecting, because I was expecting ODB to really hurt this match. Now, they did one thing in this match with Terra that I didn't really like too much, but it might lead to something. I don't know what they'll do with it. But you saw some good stuff at the beginning of the match, good back and forth action. You saw all of them pretty much working very good. And then at one point in the match, Terra was going outside of the ring, and there was some fan or something. I don't know. Obviously, this is just a plant. I don't know who the fan was. Maybe it was another female wrestler that TNA is bringing in. Haven't read any wrestling news sites who this was yet, but pretty much probably after I got this up, I'm pretty sure that everyone's going to know who it was at that point. But at that moment, you kind of saw Terra taken out of this match for a little bit, because she went out in the crowd, and then you didn't see her for a little bit, then she came back out. So you saw Awesome Kong and ODB going back and forth for a little bit, but pretty solid stuff between those two. And then the end of this match, you see ODB and Awesome Kong. They're the two that are going at each other at the end of the match. And you see Raisha Saeed come out there with a steel chair. She keeps on trying to slide it to Awesome Kong, telling her to use it in the match. Awesome Kong kicks it back every time. Then at the end of the match, ODB pretty much hits Awesome Kong with a DDT to the chair, and she retains the TNA Knockouts Championship in a 2 and 3/4 star match. Pretty solid women's match from TNA. Then the next matchup was Samoa Joe versus Bobby Lashley in the MMA versus TNA submission match. Now, this was a good match between these two. I really enjoyed it, but it was a little too short. But kind of with the lineup you had for this pay-per-view, they kind of did a little too many backstage promos during the evening and other types of stuff hyping the show up that they could have just done on the pre-show that they really didn't need to do on the pay-per-view. And that kind of probably, had them, cut some things for time constraints. And it was a short match, but it was very enjoyable. I liked what they did with each other. Good back and forth match. Good back and forth match right here. Good submissions and everything. Just good counters and everything. I would really like to see these two in a longer match because I felt if they would have went maybe 10 more minutes, they could have put on an incredible match. And the ending of this is very weak. That's the one thing that does kind of hurt this match, but I still enjoyed it, but it really hurt the match was Bobby Lashley. I guess he kind of put him in some type of headlock or anaconda vice grip for the end of the match, and Samoa Joe just pretty much passes out like a second or two after he's already placed in the maneuver. So the good thing is he doesn't tap out, so it doesn't hurt Joe there. So it makes sense he passed out, but I think they could have done something better. Maybe Joe passed out from like the triangle choke or something like that, and it would have been a little more believable than the way they ended the match. But nonetheless, it was still good. I would give it 3 stars, possibly maybe even 3 1/4 stars, because I did enjoy what they did within the match for the time they were given. Then the next matchup was Mick Foley versus Abyss in the Monsters Ball Extreme Hardcore match with special guest referee Dr. Stevie. And this match, it didn't really live up to the hype that probably everyone was expecting with this match, and it was kind of due to a lot of interference in the way they booked Dr. Stevie in this match. They shouldn't have had him be any part of this match. They should have just had it be a regular referee. And if they wanted to have Dr. Stevie involved and have Daphne involved, have them involved where they just interfere and Abyss just beats them up, instead of them having Dr. Stevie involved in so much of the match that it really hurts the quality of the match. It really hurt it for me right there. But it was cool to see Mick Foley versus Abyss against each other. That's been one thing I think a lot of fans have been wanting to see. So you at least got to see that. And it was brutal in some parts, and they did do some good stuff in here. But it was just way too much interference, way too much stuff from Dr. Stevie that really hurt the quality of this match. And during this match, you saw a barbed wire bed placed on the ring apron to the guardrail, and they used that. Abyss choke slam Daphne through that, and then Dr. Stevie, he got thrown through some thumbtacks, and the end of the match comes with Abyss winning the match and winning the Monsters Ball match. It was good, but it could have been a whole lot better than what it ended up being. I would give it 2 3/4 stars, just mainly because I did like seeing them against each other, and they did do some brutal stuff, but it could have been a little more brutal than what it was, and just the interference really hurt it for me. I think they should have just had it Mick Foley versus Abyss. That would have sold the match, and that would have made the match better than having, Stevie Richards involved in the match. I understand if they wanted to, do interference, but it just hurt the quality of it, him being in there the whole entire fucking time. Then the next matchup was Matt Morgan versus Kurt Angle, and this was billed as Wrestling's Best versus Wrestling's Future. And this was actually surprisingly good. I wasn't really expecting much from this match, but Kurt Angle did pull out a good match from him. Now, the one thing, he did put him over very good on television, and he did pretty much do a good job of seeming like Matt Morgan maybe could be a top star for TNA, but the way the crowd reacted to Matt Morgan didn't really help, because pretty much midway during this match or towards the end, you heard the crowd, pretty much everyone chant "Matt Morgan sucks" or Morgan sucks, and that really doesn't help at all, since he's pretty much the face. Now I know Angle, pretty much any wrestling fan's going to like him, but he's kind of worked somewhat as somewhat of a heel / tweener in here, and Matt Morgan's supposed to be the big face going into here, and that really doesn't say anything for Matt Morgan if you want to have him go over to the next level and make him go for the World Heavyweight Championship. And the way this match ended, now this is another one of the matches of the evening that kind of had a little weak ending. That was like the only thing that was really bad with any of the matches on this pay-per-view that could have been maybe a little better. Some of the endings were very weak. Like this ending, it just ended with a victory roll. Kurt Angle won the match with a victory roll, but Matt Morgan, he did kick out of a lot of things from Kurt Angle. He did kick out of the angle slam. He was placing the ankle lock a lot of times, and Matt Morgan was able to get out of that every single time. So he did, take some stuff from Kurt Angle, but I think he could have had a better ending than having it end in a victory roll, or, maybe you wanted to put Matt Morgan over on this pay-per-view. That would have really, maybe helped him maybe get to the next level, because obviously TNA does see something within Matt Morgan. But this was probably one of Matt Morgan's best matches so far in TNA. I would give this match 3 stars. It was a good match for Matt Morgan. It was better than what I was expecting. Kurt Angle did put on a pretty solid match with him. Then the main event was Sting versus AJ Styles for the TNA World Heavyweight Championship. Now, obviously, everyone knows the outcome of this match. Before I even talk about the match, AJ Styles does retain, so thankfully TNA did keep the title on AJ Styles, and they didn't have Sting yet win at Bound for Glory for the 4th time in a row. That's the good thing about this event. That's probably the best thing coming out of this event, other than the Ultimate X, that the main event you actually had your homegrown talent go over. Now, this is probably going to really help AJ Styles out. Now, the ending of this match, just like the Victory Roll and just like some 1 or 2 other matches on the show, the ending was kind of weak. What they did at the ending of this match was AJ was out of the ring. He hit Sting with the Pele kick. Then Sting pretty much sold it, acting like he wasn't, going to fall down. Then he fell down. Then AJ just hits a springboard frog splash, and he wins the match that way to retain the title. Now, I'm not complaining that he retained the title. That's the best thing that came out of this match. And what they did in this match, early in the match, you saw some good back and forth work between these two. This was definitely better than their match they had at TNA's Turning Point 2008 pay-per-view. And they did do some good stuff in here, so it was better than that. And I did enjoy the match. I just thought, it could have had a better ending. Like, at the end of the match, instead of using a springboard frog splash, if you wanted that to be the ending after the Pele kick, you could have had AJ Styles at least hit the 450 or something and make it look more effective. It looked very weak. And then not only after that, after AJ pins him 1, 2, 3, Sting pretty much gets up 1 or 2 seconds after that, right after AJ Styles. So, it just looked very weak for a finish of a pay-per-view. But it was a good match, mainly just because I'm glad TNA put over a homegrown talent, and I did enjoy the match. Probably might be overrating it a little bit, but I would give it 3 1/4 stars, maybe even 3.5, because what they did was good, and thankfully they did have AJ Styles go over, and Sting actually, finally put over someone at Bound for Glory. That's the best thing that came out of this. And this show overall, I would give it a 7.75. Then after the match, Sting pretty much said, this is pretty much my farewell. It's best I ended this in my hometown. Now, is he actually going to retire? We're going to have to wait and see. I mean, a lot of wrestlers, when they build matches as retirement matches, they'll come back within a week or they'll come back within a month or so. I mean, many wrestlers have done it, and obviously wrestling companies has done it as well. So we'll have to wait and see if this is actually his, final match within TNA. I highly doubt it. I expect him to be back probably within a month or 2, or hell, maybe even sooner than that. Maybe have some, storyline where he, someone forces him to come back within TNA, and he has his little farewell tour, because there were rumors that he was going to have a little, 6-month farewell tour within TNA, because I think he has signed another contract with TNA for at least like another 6 or 8 months. So we'll have to wait and see what they do there. And there were some things on this pay-per-view that I thought could lead to something good at the next pay-per-view. It looks like with Kurt Angle going over Matt Morgan, it seems like they're going to do AJ Styles versus Kurt Angle at the next pay-per-view. At least that's what I'm thinking they're going to do. Wondering what they're going to do with the whole Terra and the fan. I don't know who that is, so we'll have to wait and see. I was wishing that, either Terra or Awesome Kong would have won the title, because then we could have got maybe a singles match with them next month. But ODB is still the TNA Knockouts Heavyweight Champion. Maybe we'll get a barbed wire massacre type match with Mick Foley and Abyss, and then we get the top-level hardcore match that many fans were expecting for this pay-per-view. It was good to see them against each other, but it was a little bit disappointing. The Ultimate X match was incredible. Overall, I give this pay-per-view a 7.75. It's not a show I would say is a must-buy or a must-see or anything, but it was a good show. Probably one of TNA's best shows in a little while, so that's the good thing from it. And it actually seems like TNA from this pay-per-view could lead up to something good for their next pay-per-view, which is something that's good to see within TNA, that from one of their pay-per-views and one of their big pay-per-views, they actually might lead to something good for their next pay-per-view. So, yeah, that's it for my TNA Bound for Glory 2009 pay-per-view review. Peace. Ultimate X match that you would expect. Very spotty, but it was very enjoyable. Pretty much everyone worked very well, and Christopher Daniels took a lot of sick bumps within this match, and just very enjoyable. Pretty much everyone in here did some good stuff. A lot of high-flying maneuvers, just what you would expect with one of these matches. And with this Ultimate X match they used the ropes, to have the Ultimate X belt on it, but they had the type of thing they had for like the X match they had up there, kind of like their scaffold match, and they had that above the cables. And the way this match ended was TNA Bound for Glory 2009 pay-per-view review. Pay-per-view just ended, and I thought overall it was a pretty good pay-per-view outing from TNA. This is probably one of TNA's better pay-per-views in a little while. Now, there were a few things with some matches that maybe could have been a little better than what it was, but I think overall the whole entire event was pretty enjoyable, and really there was only one match that you would classify as terrible, and maybe two matches. There was one other one that you probably would have classified as in between terrible or maybe watchable or decent. Show started off, they did a live pre-show, and on the live pre-show they did a tag team match with the Motor City Machine Guns versus Jay Lethal and Consequences Creed of Lethal Consequences. And this was a pretty decent match between these two teams. It was just a little too short. I think they should have been given a little more time, but since this match was on the pre-show, I wasn't really expecting them to be given too much time. But what you saw from them was pretty good. Good back and forth action. An X Division based style match. This is the type of match you would expect these two teams to have on Impact, and it was fairly short, like I said, but it was enjoyable. And the Motor City Machine Guns go over and win this match after hitting a crossbody neck breaker to Consequences Creed in this match. I give the match 2.5 stars, and don't know if they announced it within this match, or I might have just missed it and wasn't paying attention to the announcers then. But the first match of the you saw Suicide and Daniels. You saw them up there brawling back and forth, and then did a sick spot where Suicide pretty much, I don't know what you'd call it, maybe like a neck breaker or a DDT or some type of spot to Daniels, and they both fall down. And Amazing Red was up there as well. And then under them, you saw Chris Sabin and Alex Shelley on separate sides of the ropes trying to go for the X Division Championship. And then Red comes down, grabs the title, so Amazing Red does retain the X Division Championship. And very good opening match. Good way to start the pay-per-view. 3 3/4 stars. I would say definitely the match of the night. Then the next matchup was for the pay-per-view portion of the pay-per-view was the Ultimate X match, and they said that the Pope D'Angelo Nero couldn't make the pay-per-view due to some family emergency, so I don't know what's going on with him at this moment. And they announced that Alex Shelley and Chris Sabin got added to the match because they won the tag team match. They might have said something during the announcing of the tag match on the pre-show. I might have just not been paying attention to it. But the first match on the pay-per-view portion was the Ultimate X match for the X Division Championship with Alex Shelley versus Chris Sabin versus Suicide versus Homicide versus Daniels versus Amazing Red. And this was a very good way to start the pay-per-view. It was, the typical